Isabella grew up in the quiet suburbs of Dallas, Texas, where the streets were lined with oak trees and neighbors waved from their porches on summer evenings. On the surface, her life seemed perfectly ordinary. She had two loving adoptive parents, John and Margaret Thompson, who worked hard to provide for her. John ran a small auto repair shop, while Margaret was a teacher at the local elementary school. Their home was filled with warmth, laughter, and the smell of Margaret's homemade peach cobbler. And yet beneath all that comfort, Isabella carried a wound she could never quite name. It wasn't something her parents did wrong. On the contrary, they adored her. But from her earliest memories, she felt an invisible distance between herself and the world around her. While her friends boasted about resembling their moms or inheriting their dad's eyes, Isabella could only nod politely, pretending it didn't bother her. Her earliest possession, a tiny hospital bracelet with faded letters and a smudged date, was the only link to her beginnings. Margaret had given it to her when she turned 12, saying softly, "This was the day you were born, sweetheart. All we know is that someone wanted you to be safe, and we were lucky enough to become your family." But Isabella couldn't shake the feeling that she had been left behind, unwanted. Why had her birth mother given her up? Why had no one ever come searching for her? By the time she reached 26, Isabella had built a life of her own. She worked as a graphic designer for a marketing firm in Dallas, lived in a small apartment decorated with plants and art prints, and had a close circle of friends. But on quiet nights when the city lights flickered through her window, the unanswered questions pressed against her chest like a weight. One evening, while scrolling through her phone after a long day, Isabella noticed a new message request on social media. The sender was anonymous, the profile picture just a gray silhouette. The message read, "Your story isn't what you think. You were never unwanted. Look deeper." Her heart pounded as she read the words again. She wanted to dismiss it as spam, yet something about the message felt deliberate, purposeful. That night she hardly slept. The phrase repeated in her mind over and over, "You were never unwanted." The following weekend, she decided to pull out the old shoebox where she kept the few fragments of her past. The hospital bracelet, a birth certificate with suspiciously neat handwriting, and a faded Polaroid of herself as a toddler in the Thompsons' backyard. Nothing new. Nothing that could explain the message. Still, Isabella couldn't ignore the gnawing curiosity. She made a quiet promise to herself. She would start digging. She would look for answers, no matter how painful they might be. At dinner the next evening, she brought it up to her parents. Margaret's fork froze halfway to her mouth. John set his glass of iced tea down slowly. "Sweetheart," Margaret said carefully, "we've always told you everything we knew. You were 3 when you came to us. The adoption was legal, everything was in order. We didn't want to burden you with details that might hurt you. But don't you see?" Isabella's voice cracked. "Not knowing is what hurts. I need to find out for myself." Her parents exchanged a heavy look, one filled with both fear and love. "Then we'll support you," John said finally, though his voice trembled. That night Isabella lay awake with her laptop open, searching through public records, adoption forums, and news archives. Somewhere, she believed, the truth was waiting. She didn't yet realize that this search would unravel her entire understanding of who she was, and lead her straight to the mother she thought had abandoned her forever. But then something unexpected happened. What secret is hidden behind Isabella's past? And who sent that mysterious message? If you were in Isabella's place, would you confront your parents or chase the truth alone? Share your thoughts in the comments. The days after receiving the mysterious message were restless for Isabella. She couldn't concentrate at work, and even simple tasks like grocery shopping felt heavy, as if her mind was constantly drifting elsewhere. She began to notice small details in her documents that didn't add up. Her birth certificate, for instance, listed a hospital in Houston, but when she searched the address online, she discovered the building had been demolished years ago after a series of scandals. The handwriting on the certificate also looked almost too perfect, like it had been copied from a template. Curiosity turned into determination. Isabella decided to dig deeper. One Friday afternoon, she took a day off from work and drove down to Houston, a 3-hour trip that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. The city skyline rose in front of her as she approached, her stomach in knots. She headed straight to the county clerk's office where old records were kept. The clerk, an older woman with silver hair and reading glasses perched on her nose, flipped through a set of dusty files before frowning. "That's strange," the woman muttered. "Your birth date is here, but the hospital records don't show a child discharged under your name. In fact, there were 2 female births recorded that night. Not 1. Isabella's heart skipped a beat. "2?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The woman nodded, tapping her finger on the page. "Yes, but one of them is marked stillborn." A chill swept through Isabella's body. She had never heard of this before. Her parents hadn't mentioned anything about another child, and the adoption papers she'd seen growing up had only ever included her name. Driving back to Dallas, Isabella's thoughts spun out of control. Could it be possible she had a twin? And if so, what had really happened to her? That night, she sat at her kitchen table staring at the hospital bracelet. She noticed something she'd never paid attention to before: the faint remains of another number etched next to hers, as though the bracelet had once been part of a pair. Her phone buzzed. Another message from the anonymous account. "The truth is closer than you think. Ask your mother." This time Isabella couldn't ignore it. She called Margaret immediately, her voice trembling as she demanded answers. Margaret stayed silent for a long time before finally saying, "Isabella, maybe it's time you met someone." The next morning, Isabella drove to her parents' house where Margaret handed her a folded piece of paper. It had a phone number and a name written in delicate cursive: Ana Lopez. "Who is this?" Isabella asked, her throat dry. Margaret sighed deeply. "She's your biological mother. She contacted us once years ago, but we didn't think it would be good for you to be confused as a child. She begged us not to tell you until you were ready." Isabella's world tilted on its axis. For 26 years she had believed she was abandoned. Now she was being told her birth mother had been alive, waiting, and perhaps hiding something. Her fingers shook as she dialed the number. After 2 rings, a soft, hesitant voice answered. "Hello. Anna, this is Isabella. I think you're my mother." There was silence on the line. Then came a quiet sob. "Oh my God, I've waited so long for this call." Isabella's chest tightened. She wanted to scream, to cry, to demand answers all at once. Instead, she whispered, "Why did you give me away? Was I really unwanted?" The reply came with a weight that seemed to stretch across the years. "No, Isabella, you were never unwanted. But there are things you don't know. Things about the night you were born. You were never alone. You had a sister." Isabella froze. The phone pressed tightly to her ear. A sister. A twin. The one marked stillborn in the hospital records. Her world was no longer just uncertain. It was shattered. The next weekend, Isabella agreed to meet Ana Lopez in person. They chose a small cafe in Houston, halfway between Isabella's apartment in Dallas and Anna's modest home in a quiet neighborhood on the city's outskirts. When Isabella walked through the cafe doors, her heart thudded so hard she thought everyone around could hear it. At a corner table sat a woman in her late 40s, her dark hair streaked with silver, hands folded nervously around a steaming mug. Her eyes, so much like Isabella's, lifted as their gazes met. "Isabella," Anna whispered, rising to her feet. The hug that followed was awkward at first, stiff with years of distance and confusion, but then Anna clung to her daughter, as if afraid she might vanish again. Isabella stood frozen, torn between anger and the ache of longing she had carried her entire life. They sat down and Anna's hands shook as she reached across the table. "I need you to know something," she said. "I didn't give you up because I didn't want you. You and your sister. You were both born in that hospital. I was told one of you didn't survive." Isabella's chest tightened. "But that's not true, is it? Because there are 2 birth records. 2 girls. I saw them." Anna closed her eyes, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I didn't know until years later. A nurse who worked that night confessed to me that babies were being taken, sold, placed in illegal adoptions. She told me my second baby hadn't died at all. She begged me to stay quiet, said I'd never be able to fight the system. I was 19 years old, scared and alone. I believed her lies." Isabella's stomach turned. "So you're saying My sister could still be alive? Anna nodded slowly. Yes. And I believe she is. I've been searching, Isabella. I found clues that point to a family in Oklahoma who may have adopted her legally, without ever knowing the truth. But I couldn't reach out to you. I thought it would destroy you to know. Isabella's mind spun. She had spent her life convinced she was unwanted, only to learn she had been part of something much darker, a cover-up that stole her twin away. Why didn't you fight harder? Isabella asked, her voice trembling with both rage and despair. Anna's shoulders slumped. Because I was afraid, and because every time I tried to speak, doors slammed in my face. Doctors denied everything. Records vanished. I thought if I raised you in secret, they would come for you too. Giving you up for adoption felt like the only way to keep you safe. The words cut like glass. Isabella wanted to believe her, but anger simmered beneath her skin. Safety? How safe had she felt growing up with a hole in her heart, believing she had been abandoned? Still, a small flame of hope flickered inside her. If her sister was out there, she needed to know. Do you know her name? Isabella asked. Anna swallowed hard. The family who adopted her called her Emily. She would be 26 now. Just like you. The name rang in Isabella's ears, filling her with a strange mixture of dread and longing. Emily. A sister she had never known, possibly living just a few hours away. Anna reached across the table again. I want to find her with you, but I need your forgiveness first. Isabella stared at her mother's trembling hand, her mind torn in two. Part of her wanted to walk away forever, to protect herself from more heartbreak. Another part, the part that had always felt incomplete, knew she couldn't turn back now. She finally whispered, "Then let's find her. Together." Anna's eyes widened with relief, but Isabella knew the road ahead would not be easy. Secrets buried for decades don't surface without resistance, and if Emily was truly alive, the reunion would change not only her life, but two families forever. A week later, Isabella and Anna drove together to Houston to begin retracing the past. The hospital where Isabella and her sister had been born was nothing more than a crumbling, boarded-up building on the edge of downtown. Weeds pushed through cracks in the pavement and graffiti covered the walls. Yet as Isabella stepped out of the car, she felt chills run down her spine. This was the place where her life had begun, and where the truth had been stolen. Anna led the way to a nearby diner, where she had arranged to meet someone who might help. An elderly man sat at a corner booth, sipping black coffee. His name was Robert Hayes, a retired nurse who had worked at the hospital in the 1990s. When he saw Anna, his expression softened. "It's been a long time," he said quietly. His eyes shifted to Isabella. "And you must be her daughter." Isabella slid into the booth across from him, her hands clenched together. "I need to know the truth. Did I really have a sister?" Robert nodded gravely. "Yes. There were two of you. I remember because it was unusual. Twin girls, healthy, born on a stormy night. But only one baby left the hospital with official records. The other was taken, signed off as stillborn. It wasn't true." Isabella's breath caught. Hearing it confirmed by someone who had been there shattered any lingering doubts. "Why would they do that?" she asked. Robert sighed, glancing around as if the walls still had ears. Back then there was a quiet network of people, doctors, nurses, social workers, who placed babies into homes for cash. Sometimes they targeted young, scared mothers who didn't know their rights. It was wrong. "I regret not speaking up sooner." Anna wiped her eyes. "Do you know where my other daughter went?" Robert hesitated, then pulled a folded paper from his pocket. "I've kept this all these years. It's a copy of an adoption transfer. The name of the family was changed, but the destination listed is Oklahoma City. The baby was called Emily." Isabella's heart pounded. Emily. The name wasn't just a rumor, it was written in ink. With Robert's note in hand, Isabella and Anna set out on their next journey, Oklahoma. The drive felt endless, their conversations wavering between cautious hope and raw pain. For hours, the landscape of open fields rolled past, but Isabella could barely see them. All she could picture was a face she had never known, a twin who might look just like her. When they finally reached Oklahoma City, they began digging through adoption records at the county courthouse. Days of searching brought little progress until they found a file for a young woman named Emily Carter, adopted in 1999 by a local couple, David and Laura Carter. Anna's hands shook as she traced the name on the page. This has to be her. That evening, Isabella sat in the hotel room staring at her reflection in the mirror. For the first time, she wondered what Emily's life had been like. Did she grow up happy? Did she feel the same emptiness Isabella had always carried? Would Emily even want to meet her? The next morning, Anna suggested they drive by the address listed in the old records. Nervously, they parked across the street from a cozy suburban home with a white picket fence and a small garden. Children's bikes were scattered in the driveway. And then, as if fate itself was playing a hand, a young woman stepped out of the house. She had long, dark hair, a posture so familiar it made Isabella's breath stop. Even from a distance, she could see the uncanny resemblance. Anna gasped, clutching Isabella's arm. That's her. I know it. Isabella's pulse raced as she gripped the car door handle, torn between running toward her sister and staying frozen with fear. What if Emily didn't want to know the truth? What if knocking on that door destroyed the life she had always known? The decision weighed heavy. The moment she had dreamed of was here, but so was the risk of rejection. Isabella's heart thundered in her chest as she watched the young woman step down the porch steps. The resemblance was undeniable. Same brown eyes, same graceful posture, even the same half-smile that Isabella often caught herself making in photos. For a moment, she felt as if she were staring at her own reflection, alive and moving outside of herself. Anna squeezed her daughter's hand. This is your moment, Isabella. You don't have to decide right now, but if you wait too long, you might lose it. With trembling legs, Isabella opened the car door. Every step toward the house felt like walking into a dream. Emily, her twin, her other half, was unlocking her car door when Isabella's voice broke through the silence. Emily? The young woman turned, startled. Her eyes widened as she took in Isabella's face. It was like watching shock give way to recognition, as though some instinct deeper than memory told her they were connected. I'm sorry, Emily stammered. Do I know you? Isabella swallowed hard. My name is Isabella Thompson. I think we're sisters. Emily froze, her keys slipping from her hand and clattering onto the pavement. She stared at Isabella, then at Anna, who stood a few feet behind, tears brimming in her eyes. This has to be some kind of mistake, Emily whispered. I don't have a sister. Isabella took a step closer, pulling the hospital bracelet from her pocket. You were born the same night I was. Same hospital in Houston. They told our mother that one of us had died. But you didn't. You were given to another family. Emily's face went pale. Her adoptive mother, Laura, appeared at the doorway calling, Emily, is everything all right? Confused, Emily waved her off. I need a minute. Laura frowned but stepped back inside, leaving the two young women standing under the weight of a truth that felt too heavy for words. Why are you doing this? Emily demanded, her voice trembling. If this is true, then my whole life, everything I thought I knew, has been a lie. It's not a lie, Isabella said softly. It's just incomplete. You weren't unwanted, Emily. Neither of us were. We were victims of something bigger, something wrong. But you deserve to know the truth. And I deserve to know you. Emily's eyes welled with tears. For a long moment she said nothing, her gaze darting between Isabella's face and Anna's. Finally, with a trembling breath, she whispered, Prove it. 2 weeks later, the DNA results came back. The test confirmed what their hearts had already suspected. They were twins, bound by blood, torn apart by lies. The reunion that followed was both joyous and raw. Emily cried in Isabella's arms, confessing that she too had always felt something missing, a hollow space she could never explain. Laura and David, her adoptive parents, were devastated but ultimately supportive, assuring Emily that their love for her was unshaken. For Anna, the reunion brought both relief and grief. She apologized over and over, her guilt heavy. But both daughters began to see her not only as the mother who lost them, but as the woman who had also been betrayed by a system stronger than she could fight. Slowly, they began to stitch together a new family. Dinners were shared, stories exchanged, laughter mingled with tears. For the first time, Isabella looked at her sister and felt the ache in her chest ease. She wasn't unwanted. She was part of something greater than herself. One evening, as the sun set over Emily's Oklahoma neighborhood, the twins stood side by side, watching children play in the yard. Isabella turned to Emily and said, "All those years, I thought I was alone, but now I know. I was always meant to find you." Emily smiled through her tears. "And now that we have, we'll never let go." In the end, the truth had hurt. It had shaken everything they thought they knew. But it had also given them something priceless, the chance to choose each other, to rebuild what was stolen, and to prove that family is more than the circumstances of birth. It's the love that survives everything. This story reminds us that no one is truly unwanted. Sometimes the truth just hides in the shadows, waiting to be revealed. And when it finally comes to light, it has the power to heal what we thought was broken forever. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes in the power of love and family. And tell us in the comments, do you believe family is defined by blood or by the bonds we choose to build?